Hey you guys, my name is Hannah and I work on the marketing team here at Marriage Helper. In my role, I typically share resources on our various social media platforms to help people improve their marriage. Dr. Beam and Kimberly Holmes have asked me to read a question that was submitted to us by one of our listeners. This person asks, how do I fix a marriage when I have a lower sex drive and it has made him feel neglected time and time again? He doesn't think our relationship can change. I believe that there has been a lack of other kinds of intimacy, but I don't know what to do.
We understand that in a given marriage, it may be that either spouse, sometimes the wife, sometimes the husband, may have a lower libido than the other spouse. You might be thinking, oh, back up, Dr. Beam. Isn't it the guy always has the stronger sex drive? Not necessarily. There are many marriages where the wife actually has a stronger sex drive than her husband. Now, in this particular situation, she's the one with the lower sex drive. And it's like, okay, he thinks I can never change. What are we going to do about this? And then she's saying, I lack intimacy. Now, that's the exact same thing we were talking about a minute ago. So part of her lower sex drive, Kimberly, appears to be she feels unfulfilled in the relationship.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So it goes back to, if you really want, I mean, it's the wife asking the question here, but it's still true. If you really want there to be great sex in your marriage, then focus on having great intimacy. So since it's the wife asking this question and listening to the podcast and not the husband, and she's the one who's saying, but my husband's angry because I'm not having enough sex with him, and I want there to be more intimacy in other ways, what can she do in order to build the intimacy emotionally?
Okay. Some research I did several years ago where I had thousands of people on the internet taking this particular survey, and we excluded people that didn't meet certain criteria. One of the questions I asked was, is there anything that has significantly reduced your sexual satisfaction, sexual fulfillment with your spouse? More women answered that affirmatively than men. More women gave me reasons they were no longer sexually fulfilled. And the number one reason they gave was that they didn't have the right relationship with their spouse. I think like 45% of them said that, something like that.
Wow.
Like if we just had a better relationship. And so perhaps you can tell him, I want to be more sexual. I want to be more fulfilled and fulfilling to you. And here's the way I want to do that. And then you have a plan, and the plan you work out has to do with how can we become closer with true intimacy, openness, transparency, vulnerability, that will lead us to having more fulfillment sexually. Actually, one of my books, I don't own this particular book. I wrote it and somebody else owns it. There's one called Becoming One, written by Joe Beam. And in that book and in the workbook that goes with it, which you can get on Amazon, and I won't get a penny off of it, it's owned by somebody else. If you get that, it actually can help you develop that plan. But understand this, you'll need to find out if your low sex drive, and I'm talking to the wife here in this situation since she asked the question, if it comes from something other than not having the most exciting relationship with your husband, or maybe I should say the most fulfilling relationship with your husband. Is there anything physically, mentally, emotionally, is there anything back there that's holding you back sexually? Now, if that's the case, you'll need to think about that, visit that, and work through that. And understand that if he were to start leaving you, which I hope he does not, then I think your libido would go up almost immediately because of the fact that your fear would spike. So rather than doing that, be proactive. Now, one final point here. The Masters and Johnson's model about how people go through the sexual act, way back, Kimberly, it started with desire. And then it talked about arousal or excitement. Then it talked about plateau, orgasm, and recovery. Many years ago, or several years ago, they took the desire out. Desire's not on that thing anymore. And the reason they did is because they found, particularly with women, many women don't feel sexual desire until they become aroused. And therefore, if you can become aroused, if you can do that, if you can become aroused, and you can have the rest of the sex act go as you want it to, it's really not important that you had desire to begin with. And so perhaps one thing you might want to do, you say, he doesn't think our relationship can change. My recommendation is get that video series we just talked about with the PDFs. Think through some things, think through how you can begin to demonstrate with him. And maybe part of that becomes you initiating sex if you can get aroused and if you can orgasm, those kinds of things. You do that. And by doing so, you'll actually increase your liking and wanting to have sex. He'll begin to be fulfilled, but you still are going to need to talk about how do you get the other kinds of intimacy, right? What else can we do to help them with that kind of intimacy?
Well, what about our couples workshop?
It'd be perfect.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It teaches you all of these tools and these things, gives you shared language so that you can have these conversations. And it's the most effective thing we have seen work for really restoring marriages, making them more satisfying. And I don't know if you said this in this podcast or in a previous one we did, you have done some research on the workshop that indicates a significant, I was going to say the number, I don't know if I can, increase in sexual
Let's just say
satisfaction.
statistically significant increase in sexual satisfaction within 90 days of people that go to the workshop.
Yes. Yes. And so even if this woman's listening and saying, well, I wouldn't say our marriage is in crisis, we're just having sexual issues, our workshop is still helpful for that because of all the reasons we talked about of having a good relationship first. So you can find out more about our workshop by going to marriagehelper.com, clicking the workshops tab in the top, and then going to the couples workshop in order to find out more about how that can help.